Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini, and I am joined by my colleague over at the Hockey Writers, Alex Hobson. Alex, obviously, this is a very special edition of Maple Leafs Lounge. We really don't get to do a whole lot of post-game coverage, but here we are. The Maple Leafs beat the Florida Panthers 2-1. Crazy sequence at the end of the game in overtime with Samsonov making another save of the season. I don't even know how you could describe his play at this moment. He's just lights out good. Amazing save, and then it leads to John Tavares' game-winning goal. How are you doing, and what were your initial thoughts of that sequence?
I'm doing good. I was obviously looking forward to today's game with Knies making his debut and all, and I wasn't able to catch most of it, but I did catch the important stuff, which came in the last 5 minutes of the game. And that was a pretty fun sequence because Tavares, he had been out there for, it felt like probably 2 minutes or something like that. 227, and then he finds that boost of energy that seemed to have been long gone with the amount of time he was in the defensive zone getting hemmed in, and channeled some of that veteran strength and plowed his way towards the net. And I thought that was a great sequence. And, first thought after the game was obviously Ilya Samsonov, just an incredible performance, and one that you'd think would be very encouraging at this time of year, especially considering in the past, the way the Leafs goalies have sort of limped into the playoffs. Samsonov's looking lights out. It was a great game tonight against a team that was really, really pressing and obviously trying to make their spot known in the playoffs. So it was a great way to end the game.
Absolutely. And once again, it was crazy to see, 227 on for that long in overtime, and then manages to score in the dying seconds of that 21.3 or 21.5, I believe. But, amazing job from our captain, John Tavares. And I saw a tweet from Nick Alberga saying that the irony is that John Tavares is helping out the New York Islanders scoring the winner to keep their playoff hopes alive. So, again, food for thought right there. But let's get into the show right now. As you mentioned, Alex, off the top of the show, Matthew Knies made his debut, but before that, he signed his entry-level contract. It was the max $925,000 3-year deal. Obviously, it's going to burn 1 year right away because he signs it at this point. But, this is good news for the Maple Leafs. A year after he said, he wants to go back, tries to win a championship, was, again, ever so close, losing in overtime in the final game of the NCAA championship. How important is this signing with Matthew Knies in the fold right now that he could get some regular season looks, albeit very minimum? But what does this mean going forward for the Maple Leafs?
Yeah, I think it's a great situation for all parties, because I don't think anybody really expected Knies to be ready for the NHL this quickly, considering the type of game that he plays and where he was drafted. But he's clearly ready for the NHL physically. I thought that in what I did see tonight, he was great along the boards. He was great going up against NHL veterans, guys in their 30s, and this is a guy that's coming off of a tournament and an entire season playing against similar age people. So I thought that what we saw tonight, or from what I saw rather, he looked really good. Didn't get on the score sheet, obviously, but there is 2 more opportunities at least for him to make his presence known there. And overall, I think it's a big signing going forward. I think of Chris Kreider a lot in the way that he entered the league back in 2012. Obviously, they play a similar style game. Kreider, I think, had a similar production in his last university season, and then signed to join the Rangers in the playoffs. And, it's possible that Matthew Knies could find himself in a similar position here. You don't know if he's going to jump in and be in that game one lineup. But if nothing else, he's a black ace, and he's a guy that can come in and play hard. And he's someone that likes to win as well. He's got some experience with that, despite the loss in the NCAA final. But overall, I think it's a big thing for the Leafs going forward, and something that could sneakily help them out here.
Yeah, he definitely didn't look out of place, especially for his first game. Obviously, it's very tough, making that transition from the NCAA to the NHL, becoming a rookie, and, trying to find your footing in your very first game, where, it was a last minute call where Sam Lafferty wasn't able to go. Knies gets inserted into the lineup, and no practice, no nothing. But he did play to his strengths, and that's what he needs to do in this short amount of time, because ice time is not necessarily going to be limited, especially if he's going to be in that third line role, which we'll get to very second about his positioning. It was great to see him, transfer what he did at the NCAA and still find success right now. Although, again, didn't find the score sheet, but still made an impact, made a couple great plays to Alex Kerfoot. Two of them, actually. One of them was great along the boards, and then one of them was behind the net, giving it to Achari, and then Achari was able to find Kerfoot for another shot on net. But that is what Matthew Knies does. He's strong along the boards. He utilizes his strength, his advantage, has great hands in high traffic areas. And with that added speed and, edge work that he has to his game right now, he's able to be very deceptive and throw opponents off. So that was very noticeable. Again, it also came with some hiccups as well, a couple turnovers, but you know what? He's a rookie. He's learning. If you're looking at that as a main sticking point of why Knies shouldn't be in the lineup, or I'm just going to stop it right there, because I know people are going to say, oh, he turned the puck over, but you know what? A lot more positives than negatives at this point. As I mentioned, he was in the lineup, third line, being with Noel Acciari and Alex Kerfoot. Now, based on the past, especially with rookies coming into the lineup, they've always seen sheltered minutes, but he was already inserted in the third line and even got some looks, even in the top six at certain points. Where do you see is the most ideal fit for Knies if he's able to get into the next two games down the stretch?
Well, in the next two games specifically, I think you have to play him in the top six. I mean, I understand that Sheldon Keefe is going to try him with just about everybody on the team, and that's what he did tonight. He starts off with Kerfoot and Acciari and ends up playing in the top six with Tavares and Nylander. Or was it Tavares and Nylander, or was it Matthews? Was he out there? I think
it was on the Tavares line.
Tavares line. That's right. Okay, so he's going to get looks with everybody. Keefe likes to tinker, especially at this time of year. He wants to get a look at as many different combinations as possible, so he knows what's good to go with and what's you'd like to stay away from in times that require new lines in a pinch. So overall, I think he can play anywhere, but I think over these next two games, you'd be doing him a disservice, if you didn't play him in the top six. I mean, you give him every opportunity to succeed, see what he's made of, and if he impresses, then who knows? Maybe you've got a guy that slides in and makes an impact there in the playoffs, and obviously that's asking a lot of him. But I think that for a guy of his type, the Leafs don't really have a player that plays like him in the top six. I don't really have an issue with him playing in the third line, fourth line, but I think overall you'd want him playing those top 6 minutes, because it'll give him every opportunity to succeed. And, for a guy that's, like you said earlier, he had no practice with the team. He just showed up today and jumped right into the lineup. I mean, if you're going to go that far, you might as well throw him to the Wolves completely and give him the two best players on the team. So I'd like to see him in the top 6 over these next few games.
Yeah, I do think that the top 6 is the most ideal situation in the long run. I think maybe next year, that's when we'll probably see him get those top 6 minutes. But I thought getting into that third line role was a big step forward for not only for the team, but for himself, to try and say, hey, I mean, there have been times where we saw, Nick Robertson and other players. I mean, obviously depth players get thrown into the bottom 6, but Nick Robertson, considering his ceiling, we've seen him quite a bit in the bottom 6, especially on the fourth line as well. Playing 8-9 minutes is not going to do any good. But at the same time, I thought with the shifts that Knies was on, he did have that impact. He was noticeable. And, he was with 2 veteran players trying to help him out, make sure that his nerves are, in check, again, it was all going back to playing to his strengths, and that was the main thing that I saw with Knies in that third line role. I don't know why I was saying third pairing there, but in that third line role, I thought he was calm. Even when the mistakes happened, he didn't quite necessarily panic, but he was able to recover and try and get back into his position and, get everything in check. But I really do think that this was the ideal spot for him to be inserted into the lineup for his first game. Not to set too much too high expectations on him where you are putting him into the top six. But then again, like you said, things can change. If he continues to show that growth game by game, we'll see what happens next. But, he's basically auditioning right now. And throughout the whole entire season, we saw that his maturity and his ability to be, a competitor, a really great work ethic and mindset that he has coming into the arena. I think that's going to be huge for him and big for him going forward if he's going to be, still going to be in that third line role, because who knows what can happen. I don't think it's going to be a good sign if you put him in the fourth line, although, he can succeed in there, but you want us to get his best potential out of that. So I think the third line was the best spot for him now, and even heading into the playoffs. And again, we're probably going to be jumping the gun a little bit on this because, you want your best players in the lineup for the playoffs, right? You don't want to put that kind of pressure on a rookie skater, but at the same time, we've seen Knies in the big stages of, the Olympics, NCAA championships, finals, World Juniors. He's played on the big stage and he has succeeded or, played relatively well, even though in some tournaments or big games, points weren't there, but his consistency was there. Because of that resume, Alex, obviously, if he plays well, he could play himself into a playoff roster spot. If everything goes according to plan, is it possible to see him come game one, Matthew Knies, third line wing in the playoffs?
I think you would have to really blow Sheldon Keefe away over these next two games, because I think we're all kind of hopping on board the Knies train, and I know it's exciting and everyone wants to see him in the lineup and potentially contribute, especially in the playoffs, but can't forget about Zach Aston-Reese and the way that he's turned it on these past few games. I think if we're looking at the Zach Aston-Reese from like January, February, March, where he just was not contributing at all. I mean, obviously he's always good on the forecheck and he's good at keeping the energy levels high down there, but offensively he really wasn't doing much. And I think if he was still like that, then I think Knies coming in and stepping into the game one lineup is a much more prevalent conversation. But I think for right now, the way the Leafs were playing their lines before he got here were working out really well. And especially like even just the game before, that line of Aston-Reese, Kampf, and Lafferty, it's looking like that line could be an item in the playoffs. So I do think that whoever is in contention to lose their spot, like players like Aston-Reese and potentially others in the bottom six, I think that they'll potentially have a short leash. But I don't think that Aston-Reese is going to, for example, he's going to be out of the lineup for Knies. I think Knies is going to probably be on the bench for the first couple of games. And if the Leafs need a change in the forwards and someone's not performing or not holding up their end of the bargain, then I think Knies is somebody that can come in and step in then. But I don't think he's there for game one.
Yeah, it really is a tall ask for Knies to come in and, try and battle for that spot or knock somebody out because, you just mentioned the fourth line, and I recently wrote about that at the Hockey Writers, how they're starting to form that chemistry right now. And even on the third line, if you have, O'Reilly and Achari occupying two of the three spots, obviously you're probably going to give the tie to Alexander Kerfoot, who has been playing much better and finding the score sheet a lot lately. So even for Knies to try and knock somebody like him out is going to be a tall task because of the fact that, basically seniority rules at this point.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time a rookie player, like either coming out of college or, getting called up late in the season, having that significant impact in the playoffs. I think maybe the last one I could remember off the top of my head was PK Subban in the mid thousands when Montreal was still a contender, and he's coming in, and then that's when Carey Price was coming in as well, and they were starting to try and build that roster for them. I think that's the only one at the top of my mind, but I do think that he's going to have to prove himself that, yeah, he deserves to stay in the lineup. Obviously, he's there for a depth reason in case there's an injury that happens. Obviously, the game against the Panthers was a promising sign of what could come if, let's say Calle Yarncroke is so injured, or let's say Sam Lafferty gets injured again. You have someone reliable that you can rely on to come in, have that mindset, have that power forward like game, get into the corners, get to the middle of the ice, and, generate chances and even block shots. And even so, I don't think he'll get any time on the penalty kill, but he has shown to succeed in that aspect as well. So he could be a factor on both ends of the ice. It's just going to be, is it going to be enough to overthrow one of the, tenured players in the league or veteran players? That's going to be interesting. Obviously, my mind says, yes, throw Matthew Knies in there. I want to see him, get in there and show him, or make him show everybody that he is a top prospect in the system. But at the same time, temper expectations, because he is still, one game of experience under his belt compared to, like you mentioned, Reese, Aston Reese, Lafferty, Kerfoot. They have more games under their belt. So it's going to be interesting to see. But again, anything can happen in the playoffs. He can battle it and maybe, can get in if one player has a bad game. Again, a lot can happen. As we reach the halfway point of our show, this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Hockeypedia. Have you ever been looking for details on a team's player list? Do you want to know the Maple Leafs Stanley Cup history? Yeah, just put 1967 in the comment section. We get it. Who is in the 2015 Stanley Cup playoffs? What are the NHL awards and what's their history? If you're interested in these or any other hockey questions, make sure you check out and bookmark the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia page, an ever-growing collection of hockey resources that is invaluable to any fan looking for information. Look for a link in the show description below and dive in today. As we were talking about, the possibility of Matthew Knies coming into the lineup, barring any injuries of some sort, obviously it has been a couple of tense games for the Maple Leafs, whether it's, Jake McCabe, missing the start of the third period and then coming back midway, or Ilya Samsonov. It looks like he's been having a rough stretch as of late, not in terms of his play, but in terms of possible injury concerns and everything that happens, considering what's happened to Matt Murray, how they don't have, an AHL call-up and they have to go to an EBUG a few times. He seemed to look like he may have pulled something in the game against Montreal. He took a couple of shots high up in the game against Florida, and even so it looked like his ankle kind of like bent back a little bit. And it seems like everything that happens with Ilya Samsonov, it's always like we're holding our breath because of a possible injury situation, and we don't want that considering how well he's playing. Alex, obviously it's no worse for wear, but should there be a little bit of more of a cautious approach to who they're starting these last two games?
If I was Sheldon Keefe, I would put a pylon in the net before I'd start Samsonov at this point. Really, like these last two games are, if anything, about getting as many combinations looked at as possible, and guys who hadn't played in a while, like O'Reilly, getting them ready for the playoffs, making sure that they stay fresh. I really don't see a need to start Samsonov for the rest of the year. And obviously he's not a guy, if you read some of his quotes to the media after the game, he's not someone who likes to take extended breaks. So you have to imagine he's going to want to play at least one of the next two games. But really the Leafs, I think their playoff chances severely diminish, and their chances of getting out of the first round plummet if Ilya Samsonov is not healthy. He's the main reason not the main reason, but he is one of the reasons that the Leafs have been so successful this year in the regular season, mind you. And I don't see a situation where the Leafs don't have Samsonov between the pipes and they manage to make it out against Tampa Bay. I think he needs to be in there, and he needs to be in there playing well. And obviously we had those concerns with him against Montreal and a little bit tonight as well. But at the same time, he had 45 saves against the Panthers tonight. That's a team that's looking to crack their final playoff spot. They're playing for their lives right now. Samsonov stood tall, and like you said, his save led to the winning goal. So it really just shines a light on how important that he is. How important it is that he is healthy.
Career best in wins 26, 3 more than what he had last season with the Washington Capitals. Career best save percentage 917. Career best goals against average 236. I mean, this is a fantastic career that he's having right now. And honestly, if they still have an emergency backup goaltender, they go or elect to go to Justin Wall these last 2 games. Do it. I mean, I have no problem with that. And especially how there are a lot of close calls right now. The last thing you need, considering that Matt Murray is out long term, that Samsonov goes down with an injury, and then you have to rely on Joseph Wall. And as good as he has been right now, an AHL goaltender with no playoff experience, that is playing with fire right now. And obviously, I don't want anything to happen, because I mean, there are a couple of times too where, again, at one point it looks like whether it's a puck going off his helmet or, a little bit of incidental contact, you hold your breath because you don't know what's going to happen. And then, he bounces back, and then he's making like all these unreal saves. And I think what best summarizes it is his post-game conference, I think, after the game against Montreal, where it's Sammy never break. Why is that? Because he was born in Russia. I mean, with those comments, I mean, like, it seems typical that he would like try and like play on that and says, no matter what happens, I am not going to break, but, still be extra cautious because you don't know what's going to happen, because he is going to be their starter come game 1 and through the rest of the postseason. Because, hey, with the way that he's playing right now down the stretch, this is fantastic hockey, and he's going into the playoffs hot, and the last thing you need is an injury.
Yeah. And, with how instrumental he's been to the Leafs' success this year, for him to keep that up, it just gives him a massive boost in the playoffs. And you know what? I think a main reason that the Leafs came so close to beating Tampa Bay last year was because Andrei Vasilevsky didn't look good, and his playoff save percentage in that first round, I want to say, was 890 something. 890. It was I think it may have even been before. It may have even been below that. Mm-hmm. That being said, Jack Campbell's save percentage wasn't much better. His save percentage was 897. Granted, a lot of that was tanked in the game 4 where he allowed, I think, 6 goals it was. But yeah, you know what? I mean, I think that where the Leafs are right now, if they can get 915, God forbid, 920 save percentage in the playoffs, I think that's going to give them a massive boost. And Samsonov looks like he's on track to do that.
Absolutely. And, I just think that games like this, like I even joked about it after I saw the puck go off his head and his helmet, and he takes it off and he's like trying to like regroup himself. And then there's that little incident at the end where his leg kind of gets caught, and it's just like, just wrap him up in bubble wrap at this point. Or even everybody else on the team right now, because even Eric Gustafsson was injured in the warm-up, and Luke Shen had to come back in. So, it seems like this is the worst possible time for any injury to happen. So I think maybe take a step back, reevaluate, and try and rest some players, including Samsonov, if you have to, because he's your starter at this point, and there's still no timeline with Murray coming back to try and play that risk factor. So again, I think it would be wise to try and rest him, maybe one out of the 2 games, or even both.
Yeah, I think, I'd be totally okay with him resting both of the games, but knowing him, he's not going to want to do that. So I think, as bottom line, if they can get someone else in against Tampa Bay tomorrow and then maybe start him the last game of the season, I think that would be ideal.
Absolutely. And moving from the starter to the backup position, obviously with the whole situation regarding Matt Murray's health, the Maple Leafs had to call up not just 1, but 2 backup goaltenders. There was one for the Florida Panthers, but the Jett Alexander one against the Montreal Canadiens was a really great story. And we're going to get to a little bit more in that in just a second. But Alex, University of Toronto student, obviously the Maple Leafs are blowing out the Montreal Canadiens at this point. It was 7-1, gets in for the last minute and 10 seconds. What was your reaction to that? Because, at some point there were even jokes saying that, in that game, again, Samsonov injury concerns, you don't want to risk it. Take him out, put the EBUG back in, let the kid have his moments. Well, he did get his moment, albeit a minute 10. Probably would have liked to see him a little bit more as well, so he could get some of that NHL time, but he's basically living out his dream at this point.
Yeah, I thought the whole story was amazing. And I know obviously some people had some negative things to say about it, and I don't understand that way of thinking at all, if I'm being completely honest. I don't know how you can be upset about that. I mean, Montreal is way out of the playoff race. They weren't coming back in that game. Toronto didn't matter if they won or lost that game. Overall, that last minute of the game didn't mean anything for either team. And for people to come out and act like it was a bad thing that Alexander got to live out his dream. He grew up a Leafs fan. He grew up just like 2 hours outside of Toronto. I mean, I think it was a big moment for everyone involved. And I think that if people have issues with it, I think, you might have bigger problems to deal with, because it's just it was such a nice story. And I fully support the Leafs doing that, because we've seen other teams do it this year. Edmonton's done it. It's becoming a more regular. Oh, excuse me. It's becoming a more regular thing to see these players, these emergency backups, get their feet wet in the NHL. And, they gave that guy a lifetime memory. It didn't matter for the Leafs, didn't matter for the Habs. Great story all around. I don't know why anyone have any issues with it.
Yeah, and to just touch up on that, Chris Weidman said that obviously he wasn't like it, but he didn't like it. But at the same time, everyone just piled on Chris Weidman because that was just an absolutely bad take. He said they'll get what they deserve in a few weeks, which I don't understand how you can be this angry / salty / whatever you want to use about a kid coming in, living out his dream, and may never get that opportunity again. I just don't understand that with that comment. And even so, I'm going to even flash back in January when I believe it was Matt Berlin of the University of Alberta, again, emergency backup. He comes in and he plays in the game as well, but he comes in, finishes that game. I don't remember there being that much of a backlash when he came in for the Oilers, but now all of a sudden when it happens with Alexander and the Maple Leafs, it's going to create this massive uproar. It kind of seems like everybody else can do it in the league, but when Toronto does it, it's just, all right, nope, don't like it. Can't do that because you're the Maple Leafs kind of thing. I just don't understand kind of the hypocrisy around it, because if you agree that the Matt Berlin one was a feel-good story, then this should be a feel-good story as well, no matter who is playing. And again, you don't know if these goaltenders are going to get that opportunity. This is probably the highlight. And you know what? Let them soak it in. Let them absorb it. Let them have their moment. And then to have people come in and just, rain on their parade kind of thing, it really is disheartening to see, because, hey, I don't understand what's so wrong about seeing someone be happy about it and see the fans cheer them on.
Yeah. I think that, like I said, I think if you're upset about that, you're taking time to be upset about that, you got bigger problems to deal with rather. I think it's overall, it's one of those situations where regardless of what team it happens for, I think you shouldn't help but feel good for the goalie getting the opportunity. And I don't think it's different whether it's Toronto or Edmonton. I think it's a feel good story all around, regardless of who the team is.
Absolutely. And as we end off the show, I'm just going to throw out a quick rapid fire question, Alex. Obviously, this is a very quick one. With an assist tonight, Mitch Marner has 99 points. Obviously, there are 2 games left.
Yes, he does.
There you go. I don't even need to finish it. It's an interesting question, or interesting quick question, because, we mentioned about resting players. Obviously, Marner was already rested once before. Is he going to get rested again? You want even Sheldon Keefe put him out in overtime with Matthews so that Matthews could get his, I believe his 300th career or 300th goal. And then Marner, his 100th point, kind of on the same thing. And I guess Keefe was trying to do everything he can. So yeah, one more point out. I would love to see it happen as sooner than later, even if it's just like a fluke deflect or, easy
as long as his name's on the score sheet.
As long as his name's on the score sheet, that is correct. And I think he should have gotten it on that Austin Matthews goal where he's throwing it goes off Matthews' stick, it gets kicked by the defender, goes back to Matthews. It really wasn't full possession. It was a block shot going back. So I think Marner should have gotten a point. And in my mind, he does have 100 as a result of that. But officially, he doesn't. Unofficially, he does. I do think that he should hit it, especially if most likely he should be playing against Tampa Bay. Whether it's a point against the Rangers, he just needs one more point, but I say he does it because, he missed out on it last season, just shy of that, but I think he gets it done this time around.
Yep, I agree.
And that is all for this episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Be sure to check out Hockeypedia. There's a link in the show description below. Once again, we're getting down to playoff time, and come next week, we will be doing a full breakdown preview of the series against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but that is for next week. Once again, for Alex Hobson, I am Peter Baracchini, and we will see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.